It's really very important. And I'm going to tell you why it's so important. Because the Torah is eternal, and that everything in the Torah is always relevant. But the subject we're going to talk about tonight is one that the whole world is caught up in now. And it's a tragic fact that there is an enormous groundswell of anti-Semitism. We could put our heads in the sand, we can make believe it's not true, we could ignore it, but it will not change the facts. Anti-Semites are emboldened. Jewish people have been attacked from the right to the left, and even from the middle. So everybody asks the big question: why do they hate us? Why is there anti-Semitism? And the question is not only a talking heads question, which a lot of times it is, because people like to talk and hear their voice, but it's also those who ask real questions are asking the question because if we would understand, maybe we'd know what to do. And if we don't understand why this is happening, how are we going to heal it? How are we going to solve it? So tonight we're going to deal with this issue. And the issue gets dealt with by something rather surprising that shows up in the Megillah. It's a very, very small nuance. Many people catch on to it but gloss it over quickly. But the question has to be asked, and that is that when they have lunch at Wanasi and it's decided to exterminate the Jewish people, Haman has a proposal, and Achashverosh accepts, and he gives him the full power of the mightiest empire of the time to do as he pleases. Achashverosh is more than a willing partner. He doesn't just allow Haman to do what he wants, he actually participates. And the big question is, why? What was bothering Achashverosh? And if he was such an anti-Semite, why did things turn around later? Esther comes and makes an argument. She says, if they sold me as slaves, but they want to kill me. And he says, who wants to kill you? Haman wants to kill you. Let him hang. And you agreed. You were part of this. Bottom of page 13b, Maseches Megillah. We continue our analysis of the Megillah through the lenses of the Talmud. In our previous lesson, we learned that the deal was struck, or would be struck, by virtue of shekels, the money. Follow the trail with the money. Why are they so anti-Israel? It's very simple, oil money. Because there's money to be made elsewhere. Israel has no oil, the oil's everywhere else. Why would Haman think he could get away with this? He's ready to give a lot of money. But then a very strange thing happens. Vayomer HaMelech, in the first chapter of the Megillah, the third chapter of the Megillah, in verse 11, the king responds. Vayomer HaMelech LaHaman, the king says to Haman, HaKesef nasun lach, the money is given to you. V'ha'am, and the nation, la says bei ketov beinecha, you can do with them as you please. So if it just would say, Vayomer HaMelech, the king said to Haman, here's my SWIFT number, deposit the money tomorrow morning. V'ha'am la says bei ketov beinecha, this would not be a difficult verse. Haman offered the money. Achashverosh said, fine. There's going to be a little bit of a dip in the economy, because after all, my Jews are, as a rule, tax-paying citizens, and they're industrious, and some would argue they might be part of the economy's engine, but there's money. There's money. You're planning to make up the shortfall. Fine. Deposit the money in my bank account, and you can do as you please. But he doesn't say that. He says, HaKesef nasun lach, I'm paying you for this. You wanted to pay me? I'm paying you. V'ha'am, the nation, do as you please. Why would I stand in your way? That's what Achashverosh said. And that is enormously puzzling. Why did he say that? Firstly, why did he even say HaKesef nasun lach? You look in the bottom of the page, there's a little commentary. If you look in the original Vilna Daf, right on the Hebrew side, the Aramaic side, you see it's like zigzags. So it's a funny page of Gemara, because most pages of Gemara have Rashi on the inside and Tosfos on the outside, and that's how it is on each side of the Gemara. Rashi on the inside, but here we have a funny situation. The funny situation is that there's not many Tosfos. Tosfos didn't have much to say. So on both sides of the page you have Rashi, and the Tosfos, two little Tosfoses. They kind of stuck them in. They have it zigzagging on the two little Tosfos, a little tiny Tosfos. And Tosfos here reads like his commentary on Chumash, maybe, like the Das Zakenim in the Balei Tosfos, or the Hadar or Moshe Zakenim of the Tosfos. He says, "Hakesef nason loch, gematria the hakesef, oila ha'etz." The numeric equivalent of the word hakesef, the silver, which is Hebraic for the cash, is the same numeric equivalent of the word ha'etz, which means the wood. What's the wood? That's a euphemism for the gallows, as we hear multiple times in the Megillah, that Haman built a tall gallows, and he was planning to hang Mordechai on the gallows. And in the end, Achashverosh says, Haman should hang from the gallows. And what did they do? V'salu oisai, they hung him al eitz. So wood in the Megillah becomes a euphemism for the gallows. In case you didn't know it, Jewish people don't knock on wood. In our vernacular, it would be like saying knock on the gallows. Why would I do that? So in other faith systems, they used to have iconography that was made of wood. Not everybody could afford gold or silver, and they would wear religious symbols, so they would have a wood symbol. The serfs would have a wood symbol. The wealthy people, the princes, the squires, the people who exploited the poor, they had gold and silver hanging around their neck as their act of religious devotion. But the simple people had wood. That's what they could afford. And knock on wood would be that they would literally touch this amulet, what they consider to be a touchstone of sorts for their religious devotion.
I heard it was also the cross, knock on the cross.
In case you listened to what I said, that's exactly what I said. Yes. What do you think they wore around their neck? A Magen David? Be a little quicker than that. Come on. So knocking on wood is not a Jewish thing. And people tell me, oh, Rabbi, knock on wood. Why would I knock on wood? If you want, kiss the mezuzah. Give tzedakah. Hold a siddur. Why would you knock on? But for us, wood, if you say eitz, just plain wood, in the biblical vernacular, is the gallows. So Tosfos says, yeah. Eitz, gallows, says, hakesef nasun lach. What's bothering Tosfos? The Mefarshim of Tosfos say what's bothering Tosfos is, like, why did Tosfos resort to midrashic interpretation? Gematria. It's not Tosfos' thing. The Tosfos asks hard questions. He's the pshat man. If this doesn't make sense, if it contradicts what's written elsewhere in the Talmud, the Tosfos comes along and he says, what's going on there? It doesn't seem to work. Elsewhere in the Talmud, we find it described differently, or there's a different ruling, and the Tosfos will come up with creative solutions, which is the beginnings of what we call modern-day Jewish jurisprudence, lomdus. But the Tosfos here is giving us a story about a gematria. That kesef is a gematria of eitz. And he says, Ramaz loy sheyitla alav. Achashverosh was telling him that he would be hung. Really? Achashverosh was telling him he would be hung? I mean, you want to go further from the pshat? I don't think you can if you tried. Achashverosh is telling Haman, go ahead and exterminate all the Jews. And Tosfos says, no. He really was saying, this is a game. I make believe I don't like Jews. I make believe I don't want the money. But really, you're going to get hung on the eitz. So, the Mefarshim of Tosfos explain that there's, on the pshat level, something totally incongruous about the words that Achashverosh uses. Forget the fact that it's so strange that he doesn't want the money. Who doesn't want money? I'm Jewish, my mother's Jewish, my father's Jewish, my grandparents are Jewish. I can make Jewish jokes. I get away with it. Everybody says Jews are cheap. That's what I hear from people all the time. Say, it's a funny thing. I shop at No Frills, I shop at Sobeys. Everybody returns their wagons for $1. Not only the Jewish people. If it's true, only Jewish people should be returning the wagons. Everybody returns the wagons. Nobody likes to lose money. The last time I checked, normal people do not like to waste money. You hear the word free, everybody runs. You hear the word sale, forget about it. Black Friday, they call it. In Canada, we have a Yom Tov called Boxing Day, where everything goes on sale. And people get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They starve themselves. They don't go to the washroom. They stand in line. They fight with people to save $50. And then they pay $60 for parking afterwards. Last time I checked, Boxing Day is not a Jewish holiday. Everybody likes money. Everybody likes money. Human beings like money. Everybody likes comfort. Everybody likes power. These are things that every human being wants. A normal human being wants to be able to do as he or she pleases. You want to do what you please? You need to have money to do it. You want to pick yourself up and fly somewhere? How do you do that without money? You want to take a few days off? How do you do that without money? You want to have nice clothes? You want to have a nice home? You want to eat well? You need money. Everybody wants money. Achashverosh gets offered an enormous amount of money, and he says, nah, it's okay. Who needs money? Really? This is the same man who figured out how to co-opt the entire government and make himself king so he could be the wealthiest of the wealthy, and now he doesn't care about money? And it's... You don't have to do anything. You don't have to work hard. Just say wink, wink, and let me do it as I please. But Tosfos doesn't even deal with that. That's a question. That's the question of the Gemara. The question that bothers Tosfos is, what do you mean, kesef nasun lach? Achashverosh now all of a sudden is paying Haman? It was never his money. It was never his money. If Haman would have handed the money, and Achashverosh would say, you know what, I like this money, but I hate the Jews more. I'll pay you to make sure you actually do what you said you're going to do. Fine. Haman never gave a penny. He said, I will give you money. Achashverosh says, I'm giving you money. He never got it. And we don't find anywhere that Achashverosh pays. He simply forgives Haman's commitment. So why does it say Kesef Nasan Lach? So in the Mefarshim of Tosfos say, what Tosfos is really saying here is that this verbiage is something called Niba v'layodam aniba. Sometimes Hashem puts funny words in people's mouth, and they say things that they don't even realize how true it's going to be. You could call it a self-fulfilling prophecy, or you could call it in the vernacular of Torah, piv hirshiloi. He stumbled by his own words. And there are various examples. Like Bilam said a lot of strange things, and then he ate his own words. So piv hirshiloi. In the end, there's still a God, and he's in control. And people think they can say as they please and do as they please, but really it's not so. So the Eibishter arranges it for Haman, for Achashverosh to say to Haman, HaKesef nasun lach. And without knowing what he's saying, the gallows is yours. He didn't mean it, but that was the subtext. What pushed the Tosfos to go this length? What pushed him to go midrashic, to go rogue all of a sudden, the Tosfos, when he deals with pshat, and now he's dealing, because the language here is just doesn't fit. HaKesef nasun? I can't tell you I gave you something if all I did was say, don't bother giving it to me. Okay, but at any rate, this is the underlying problem of the Gemara. The Gemara here does not ask the question, by the way. The Gemara here does not ask the question. The way I'm explaining the question is primarily articulated by the Al-Kabatz, who wrote a very interesting commentary on the Megillah called Monos HaLevi. He was a Levi. The way I heard the story, the Al-Kabatz got engaged to a very nice young lady, and he didn't even have enough money to afford to bring shalach manos to his future in-laws. He's very poor. He was a poor scholar, a wonderful young man, brilliant boy, a nice shidduch, but he felt terrible. He wanted to give shalach manos, shalach manos. Okay. Maybe they invited him for the Purim Suda, I don't know. He didn't have any money, so what do you do? So he sat down for a few nights, and he wrote a commentary in the Megillah. And he gave the commentary to his in-laws. This was his gift to them. He said, I wrote you a little gift. I wrote you a little something. It's the most ingenious, a few nights. The Al-Kabatz wrote this out. This is the author of the Lachadodi, the prayer that it says, probably the youngest prayer we have in the Siddur, that's penetrated and permeated every Jewish community. It's from the same person. Anyways, they called it Manos HaLevi, the gifts of the Levi. He said, I'm a Levi, I give you a little gift. So the Manos HaLevi he explains what was bothering the Gemara. Why did the Gemara even sit down to answer the question? And the Gemara does not answer this question head on. The Gemara, for some reason, doesn't feel it can answer the question head on. And therefore, it needs to reach for a mashal, for a parable, a metaphor. Why do we use metaphor? When answers won't resonate. You're talking to somebody about something that's so esoteric, it's so flighty, it's so ethereal, they don't understand what you're saying. So you have to speak in their language. You bring it into their world, and then they understand. I was once trying to explain to a group of young Canadian children how a single mitzvah could bring Mashiach. One little person. They said, that's what I mean. How could one little person, if you have these great big tzaddikim, why would one little person's mitzvah make all the difference? I'm an implant in this country, but I learned a little bit how Canadian kids think. Hockey is the big thing here. It's hockey. I said, did you ever hear of an assist? You could have Wayne Gretzky as the center, but it could be a small little player. He happened to be right there at the net, and he just moved he moved the blade slightly, that's all. And he got the assist. Who gets the goal? Who gets credited? He does. The hockey blades were flashing. The puck was flying. It happened to be. Some guy was right there. He knocked it in. You don't have to be the greatest player for that. You have to be lucky, actually. You have to be a bar mazel. All right? And get it right in between where the goalie missed. So the truth is that metaphors are helpful when people can't understand. The ideas are too big for people to wrap their heads around. Now, the Gemara is about to tell us is clearly too big. It's too overwhelming for the Gemara simply to give us an answer to the question. So the Gemara says, Omer Rabbi Abba said, mashal. For this I need to give you a mashal. Now, before we go to the mashal, I'm going to ask you, what do you think the answer is? If Achashverosh is ready to be mevater, to overlook the offer of the money, he feels that the money is rightfully his. He's even saying, I'm giving you money, when it's not his money. What does that tell you about Achashverosh? What does it tell you? This is not a deep question. Haman wants to kill all the Jewish people. Plain and simple. We know exactly what that is. We have been the marked victims of exactly such pogroms and inquisitions and Holocausts. We have been here, unfortunately. We know what this is. This is not esoteric at all. They said to him, I want to do this. Achashverosh said, no problem. Which part of that is not understood? Well, don't you understand? From Bilam to Parai, from Esav to Lavan, what don't you understand? The anti-Semite wants to harm the Jews, and what did the law say?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You need a mashal? Oh, with this we need a metaphor. This is such a deep thing we're going to tell you now. Only a metaphor will cut it. But as the Gemara says, mashal. Okay? What's the mashal? Mashal da Achashverosh v'Haman. This is the parable, this is the metaphor of Achashverosh and Haman. The two anti-Semites who want to kill the Jewish people. One comes with the idea, the other is happy to agree to it. Lama hadavar daima. This story, this narrative, what is it like? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you what it's like. The narrative is l'shnei b'nei Adam. Think of two people. That's not so hard to think of. Le'echad, one of these people, hoyo le'teil b'toich sadeu. He had a pile in his field. He had a pile. What was it a pile of? The Gemara doesn't say. I don't know what it was a pile of.
13.
Onto 14a. We went from 13b onto 14a. This is a page turner, this class. You know? One person had a pile. I don't know if it was sawdust. I don't know if it was last year's harvest. I don't know if it was granite chips. I don't know if it was I don't know what it is. Guess what? It doesn't matter. Because if it would matter, the Gemara would tell it to us. That's the point of the mashal. It doesn't tell us what the pile was. There was something in the field that the person in the field didn't want. There was a pile of something that I had to get rid of. Whatever it might be, it's irrelevant. He has a tail b'teich sadeu. All right. Ule'echad hoya lecharitz b'teich sadeu. And one has a deep ditch in his field. It's a deep ditch. So each one's got a problem. Everybody's got problems. He's got a problem. This guy has a ditch in his field. It's disabling him from enjoying the use of his field. His real estate is damaged now because he's got this deep hole. And the other one can't utilize the property because he's stuck. It's occupied property. There's a pile of something there. Bal hachoritz Omar, the person who had the deep hole in his ground, he said, Mi yitenli, tail, who will give me something to fill the hole that I have? Where can I buy a filler? I need land filler. Anybody selling landfill? I'm ready to pay. I'm bedumim. Bal HaTeil, in the meantime, the person whose field was occupied by some substance that he didn't want there, Omar mi yiten li choretz zeh bedumim. Who will give me a place to dump this garbage? Who will give me a place where I can get rid of this? I don't know what to do with it. I'm stuck. It's taking up space. It's not allowing me to use my field. How do I get rid of this? I'm ready to pay. Liyomim nizdavgu zeh etzel zeh. It so happened that they encountered one another. And one spoke about his issue, and the other spoke about his issue. So, that's your problem? And the other one said, that's your issue? Omar le bal hacharitz, so the person who had the deep ditch in his field, he said le bal hateil to the person who had the pile in his field, mechar li teilcha, sell me your pile. I'll pay you for the pile. I need landfill. Omar le, the other one said, toiloisa, take it. I've been looking for somebody to take it, bechinam. I'm happy to give it to you for free. Just come with your own trucks. You unload it yourself. I don't want to get my hands dirty. I don't want to deal with this. You want it, it's yours for the taking. V'halavai, I'll be delighted. If only you'll come and take it, and I have no more problems. Here I had a problem, I had a pile, I didn't know what to do with it. I don't want to spend money on it, but I had to spend money on it. And now I'm a chaya. You come, you take it, I'm finished. My problem is taken care of. That's all the Gemara gives us. That's all we get. You want to know the story of Achashverosh and Haman? Each one had an issue, and the issue was taken care of by the other one. I'm asking a simple question. It's a little piece of Gemara, it's just a little mushal. For heaven's sake, what is the Gemara saying here? What did I need a mushal for? Who owns the field with the pile, and who owns the field with the ditch? So Rashi says, Mashal d'Achashverosh v'Haman. Here's a metaphor for the whole story of Achashverosh v'Haman. Kiloimar, in other words, Yesh lilmeid me'Achashverosh. We could see from here, Sha'af bedaite hoyel hashmidan. He also wanted to get rid of the Jews. Haman wasn't telling him something new. He said, Achashverosh, we got a problem. And Achashverosh said, you're telling me? He says, yes, I have this big ditch. He said, great, I have this pile. Let's do this together. You don't even have to pay me for it. So who is who? So the Maharsha says, Achashverosh has the pile. Because he had a lot of Jews in his land. You know what to do with the Jews. You know what to get rid of the Jews. They were like a tail b'sadeu, he says. They're like a pile in his field. I got this Jewish population. I don't know what to do with it. Who wants my Jewish population? I hate drawing these historical analogies for obvious reasons. But it is a matter of fact that Hitler, Yamach Shemai, his first plan was not to exterminate the Jews. His first plan was to exile the Jews. Get rid of them. When no country wanted to take them, that's when they went to Wannsee. That's a historical fact. The Prime Minister of Israel spoke about it, and he was attacked by all these, a certain ilk for saying it. But that is the truth. It's documented. There's recently documents that just came out literally in the last few weeks that the Jews of Poland were pleading with Chamberlain to let them into Israel. It's our homeland. It was an empty country. The British mandate. But the Brits were getting oil. They said no. They said no. And unfortunately, we know what happened.
The quota for America was 80,000 Germans to come there. They only permitted 20,000 for 4 years.
Yeah. But before you attack America, we're sitting in our beloved Canada, and Prime Minister Mackenzie King, when he asked how many Jewish refugees would he take in, he said 1 is too many. Let's not confuse ourselves with the facts, but those are the facts.
Yeah.
Those are the facts. At any rate, that's Achashverosh. Haman is like the Balacharitz. He wanted to throw the Jews in a grave. He wanted to kill the Jews. So he, says the Marsha, he has a hole. He's got a ditch in the ground to fill. He wanted us in a common grave. And that's how Marsha works it out. There's a problem with this explanation. The inherent problem is, with Marsha's explanation is, if you want to say that Achashverosh is taking up space, the Jews are taking up space in his country, and he doesn't like the fact that he considers it a pile in his land, okay, you could say that. But how does that work out with Haman? Like, Haman had a ditch. He wanted to throw the Jews in a ditch. I'm saying he wanted to kill them, but what do you mean he had a ditch? Where was Haman's ditch? And how by killing the Jews does he fill his ditch? Marsha doesn't answer that. The Khatam Sofer has a very interesting rumination about this. He says this is a tale of 2 anti-Semites. But it's not a tale of 2 anti-Semites who once walked the face of the earth. These anti-Semites are alive and well today also. And he said both have the same goal, the annihilation of the Jewish people. We don't like Jews. We want a world that is Juden reign. But there are 2 methods. Haman's method is lahashmid, lahareg, or la'abed, physical genocide, actual annihilation. And Achashverosh's method is mass assimilation. Melting pot. So in a few generations, there won't be any Jews left. Because the Jews will marry out of their faith. The Jews will exchange their values for souped up values, flavor of the day values, whatever it is that's popular today. They'll call that Jewish, but of course it has nothing to do with Judaism. And at some point they won't care anymore. The next generation won't fight for these values. Who cares about Judaism? It's empty, it's vapid anyway. I'm not talking about a theory. I'm talking about a fact. This is the fact. This is the tragic fact of North American Jewry and South American Jewry and European Jewry. It's a fact, a tragic fact. They both hate us the same way. One kills us to death, and one marries us to death, or loves us to death. The truth is, the Khatam Sofer's idea in this arena is not new. It's certainly not Achashverosh's idea. It's not Haman's idea. In fact, this goes back to the very first documented mass anti-Semitism. The first documentation of anti-Semitism is before we were called the Jewish people. We were just a family who is kind of evolving into a nation. We lived in a country called Mitzrayim, Egypt of old, ancient Egypt. And what did the Pharaoh say? There's too many Jews here, he said. I have a Jewish problem. Does that sound familiar? They're a 5th column, the Jews. Will be invaded and they'll support the invaders. They're not loyal to this country. They will undermine us. Got to take care of the Jewish problem. So what did Pharaoh do to take care of the Jewish problem? He tried to break the Jewish people. He tried to take ridiculous taxes and jizyas from them, try to force them to do labor, and somehow they keep growing. So what did he decide on next?
Kill the firstborn.
The firstborns? No, God killed the firstborns. Pharaoh killed the babies. Which babies did he want to kill? But diabolically, like a Gestapo. He didn't want Egyptians to kill the babies. Who should kill the babies? Jewish women should kill the babies. The Jews should kill their own babies. That's what he wanted. In Machshama. And if it wasn't Yocheved and Miriam, Shifra and Puah, that's what would have happened. So the Rebbe asked a famous question. Why did he want to kill the baby boys? He said, it's worse. He doesn't say ignore the girls. This is just a chauvinist. He said, no, Habas Techayun. Make sure the girls live. Why do you want the girls to live for? So the Rebbe said it was very simple. The Pharaoh wanted no more Jews. In the world of old, the male was dominant. That's how they understood. They were a chauvinistic reality. The Torah is always talking about women and making a big deal out of women. In the rest of the world, women were chattel. They had no opinion. They had no ability to chart their own course. Only Jews had this funny thing, where Sarah Imenu argues with Avram and God says Sarah is right. Only Rivka decides the course of Jewish history and tells Yitzchak to be quiet and just do what he says. That only happens by the Jews. By the non-Jewish world, it didn't happen in antiquity. The Pharaoh knew the baby boys, they're trouble, kill them. The baby girls, we'll marry them. They won't be Jewish anymore. So what was the Pharaoh planning? Full genocide. But historically, this divides. It divides. You don't have one Pharaoh. It divides. You have the Achashverosh paradigm, and you have the Haman paradigm. Each one hates the Jewish people the same way. Each one can stand the existence of a Jewish people. But Haman's hatred was he couldn't stand the Jew. The physical existence of a Jew drove him crazy. If he was a Mishling, if he was 1/8 Jewish, he went to kill him. A Nazi. Achashverosh, he couldn't stand Jewish people. He didn't like this whole Jewish idea. He said, as long as we could dismantle this Jewish identity thing, we'll be fine.
Like Roosevelt.
You can affix whatever names you want to it. Okay. It doesn't fit into 1940 any less than it fits into 1860, any less than it fits into 1812, and going back at pogroms and inquisitions and crusades. It fits tragically again and again and again and again. You won't gain much by fitting it into a particular pigeonhole of history, because the pigeonholes, they dot the landscape of history. So Chatam Sofer says this is what's going on here. He says the Gemara wants you to understand that there's simply two kinds of anti-Semites. How do we know this is what Achashverosh wanted? If you read the Gemara, and the Gemara's commentary on the feast of Achashverosh, if you read the commentaries on the Megillah of how the entire party was designed, it was designed to be a snare, a pit, that the Jewish people would fall spiritually. It was designed that they would choose to sin. There was kosher food, TV dinners, delicious non-kosher food. How many people are going to have the gumption and the fortitude to sit and munch on tuna fish sandwiches when they could be eating succulent roast beef on Shabbos? Achashverosh was very, very, very devious. He didn't want to see a Jewish people rise. He was afraid the Beit HaMikdash would get built again. He was afraid that the center of power would shift back to Israel. He didn't want these things. He wanted no more Jewish people. He had it all figured out. By the way, he did. He did have it figured out. As Hashem runs the world, not Achashverosh. From this Haman story and from this genocide story, the Jewish people do tshuva. And when we do tshuva, the Jewish people do get saved. But actually, we were going in the direction of mass assimilation. It was that bad. Worse than today. Enormous swaths of the nation of Israel fell off the face of earth, had intermarried, assimilated, and have never been heard from again. So this is the two mashal, the two mashalim. One has a tail, he's got a large, Achashverosh lifted the Jews up. Lift them up, give them power, give them positions, give them freedom. And with this, he'll do them in. If you want to go back a little early in history, this was Napoleon's idea. His idea was to emancipate the Jews, and through that, to assimilate the Jews. And the Tsar, he had a very different idea. He didn't want to emancipate the Jews. He wanted to crush the Jews. He didn't like the Jews. And the Alter Rebbe and his peers had a huge machlekes about this. Who was going to be better for the Jewish people? In the long run, how would we fare as a nation? And the Alter Rebbe believed that if Napoleon won, the Jewish people in Europe would assimilate en masse. And later they did. And he said if the Tsar wins, it'll be bitter for Jewish people materially, but we will survive as a nation. And we did. Chatam Sofer, that's what's going on here. So the Gemara is telling us about two kinds of anti-Semitism. And the Gemara is telling us that's the mashal. Achashverosh was an anti-Semite too. Haman wanted to pay him for it. He says, you know what? Do it your way. I was planning to assimilate them. You want to just get rid of them? You want to solve it in 1 year? I had a long-term plan. You want to do it like this? Zolzine? No problem. I was going to lift them up, a big pile. You want to just put them in the ground? Put them in the ground. It's a beautiful rumination. Sad rumination. But the problem with it is that in the end, the metaphor doesn't work. What does it mean Achashverosh had a pile? That I understand. But Haman's hole is still missing. Why did Haman have a hole? There's no hole here. He had a desire to put the Jews in the hole, but didn't have a hole. What was the crevice? What was the cavity? What was the if you will, the emptiness in Haman's life. The Chatam Sofer does not really answer or explain that at all. So lucky for us, the Rebbe once devoted an entire talk at a Purim Verbringen, Purim 1965. An amazing, amazing explanation of this Gemara. And the Rebbe said, first off, you have to know, it's clear that the metaphor is coming to explain why Achashverosh was just as hateful towards the Jewish people as Haman was. He said, don't bother paying me. I'm happy for you to do this. But the Rebbe says, why did you need a mashal for that? What's so hard to understand? The Gemara could simply answer. Achashverosh said, you keep the money. Which he didn't say, you keep the money. He said, you take the money. Achashverosh said, you keep the money. He was an anti-Semite too. That's all. If the Gemara wouldn't bring this mashal, would we understand it any less? What did the mashal do for anybody? There's a question. The answer is very easy. Mishalim, metaphors or parables are only necessary when the answer isn't going to be understood. What about this answer wasn't understood before the mashal? What did the mashal add? How did the mashal deepen and develop this idea that Achashverosh hated us too? It's a very powerful question. The Rebbe said that when there's a need for a mashal, when there's something that's difficult to wrap your head around, it's difficult to wrap your head around this. Why would Achashverosh hate the Jewish people? Why would anybody hate the Jewish people? We've contributed more to the welfare of the world than any other nation on the face of earth. We're not even 0.5% of the world's population. And nearly 50% of Nobel Prizes for achievement went to Jewish people. I'm not talking about the arts. I'm talking about the sciences. Look at the technology. I'm not talking about Lord Dynamite who invented a way to kill people. I'm talking about millions of lives saved. What will the world look like without the Jewish people? Why would they hate us? Is that actually a question? I mean, like, you say, wow, Achashverosh hated the Jewish people. Why would he hate the Jewish people? The Rebbe said, what's the question? I mean, it's not like it's anything unusual. Why did the Pharaoh hate the Jewish people? Why did Bilam hate the Jewish people? Why did Lavan and Esau hate the Jewish people? There's the story. Why did Melech Asher hate the Jewish people? Why did Nebuchadnezzar hate the Jewish people? If you're talking about something nobody ever heard of, there's this people who make enormous contributions. The king who benefits suddenly hates them. I said, I don't understand what's going on here. So you don't understand what's going on here? Well, you've never seen this movie before? What is exactly so unusual here? Do you know that in 1923, the Minister of Defense of Germany was a Jew?
Prime Minister was a Jew.
Of Germany?
Republic, yes.
Really? What's the question? It's like a mashal. It's impossible to understand how Achashverosh hated the Jewish people, so we have a mashal. And the mashal is he had a pile on his field. What's so hard to understand? I mean, unfortunately, I'm laughing, at which I cry. There's nothing that difficult. A child understands this, or at least not understands it, but he knows it. It's an inexplicable. We don't understand it, but it's not surprising. The mashal would be, I can't wrap my head around that. You can't wrap your head around history, it's a fact. That's problem one. And problem two, the Rebbe says that a mashal of Torah is called Torat Emet. The reason that we pore over these texts and study them assiduously for thousands of years is not because there is some wisdom contained in them. The reason that we have treated the text so reverently and charitably, the reason that there have been thousands and thousands of expositions written on the Talmud, and the reason that there are tens of thousands of Jews who are studying Talmud every day of their life, is not because there are some truths contained in the Talmud. It's because Torah is emes, and emet is an absolute. And because we believe that every nuance, every detail, every tiny iota is emet, is true, that's why we spend so much time in it. As Ben Bagbag, the famous convert, said, hafachba v'hafachba. You keep turning it and keep turning it, look at it this way and look at it that way. Dechoylaba, it's all in there. Everything is in there. It is the source of all truth. So the Rebbe says, from that viewpoint, is it possible to say that this mashal is half true? The mashal works halfway. I mean, kind of. There are true elements to the mashal. There's a true element that we can understand that Achashverosh had a Jewish problem, or too many Jews living in his kingdom. So that's like a pile. Haman wanted to put them in the ground, or in general, Haman's idea was annihilation. Okay, so the mashal is half true. He didn't really have a pit. He didn't really have anything to fill, but it was like he had something to fill. It was just like, hello, this is not going to work. If this is Torah, then it's emes. If it's emes, if it's true, then it's all true. And if it's not true, then it can't be half true. If Torah is half true, how do you know which half is true? Once you start dividing, say, this part of Torah, this I like, this is true, this resonates, this, razor it out. Click, bold, delete. This doesn't fit into our time. And we know where that has taken us. When you start to cut and paste, Rahman al-Litzan, it takes us into oblivion. It takes us into no Torah, to no Yiddishkeit, because Torah is all emes. So the Rebbe says, for heaven's sake, the mashal doesn't fit. None of the explanations prior to 1965, when the Rebbe spoke about this, clearly explain what the meaning of a man who had a ditch in the field. Nobody had a ditch. And the Rebbe gave us an unbelievable explanation. And I can't do it justice, because I don't have enough time. And because I can't do it justice, but I'm going to try anyway. The Rebbe said that we, the Jewish people, have a very strange relationship with the world around us. On one hand, we know that anti-Semitism is a fact of life. And there are always large parts of the population that will disdain, dislike, or even hate us. It's a fact of life. It's been a fact of our history. It cannot be ignored. You speak to Holocaust survivors from Poland. You speak to Holocaust survivors from Lithuania. You speak to the ones in Ukraine. Before Nazis came, the locals did the job. In Lithuania, 98.6% of the local population, the Jewish population, was killed. No country had a higher rate of mortality for Jews. And almost none of them were killed by the SS. Almost all of them were killed by their neighbors. Over 200 shtetl wiped out in less than 6 months. By their neighbors. Neighbors with whom they had good relations. Jews were living in Lithuania from 1323, when the Grand Duke of Vilna, or Lithuania, the Archduke, welcomed them. Lithuania was a country where the pharmacy was run by the government. And in large parts of the country, the Jewish population was so copious that the pharmacy's prescriptions were written, this is government document, written in Yiddish and Lithuanian. That's how invested the Jewish people were in Lithuania. They had a beautiful life in Lithuania. They didn't suffer like in other places. Their own neighbors. Like monsters. Like beasts, like animals. So it's a fact of life. It's a fact we can't get away from. To ignore it is to ignore it at our own peril. The ostrich is not a national bird. Putting your head in the sand does not change the facts. So what's our attitude to the world? They hate us, so we hate them? Nobody could blame us if we had that attitude. I once asked an Armenian fellow in Jerusalem, how come the Armenian quarter is so cloistered, it's so locked up? Nobody knows what's going on behind those walls. Everything has walls and other walls. And he said to me that we are survivors of the Armenian genocide. And we don't trust anybody. We fear for our lives. And this is now for generations, he says. We lock ourselves behind walls because after what the Turkish government did to us, we trust nobody. And I thought to myself, imagine what the Jewish people should be doing.
I saw a documentary about Lubavitcher going to Australia to looking for Jews in little towns. And they found Jews who gave up to being Jewish because they were afraid what happened in Germany.
This is true. There are Jews, tragically, who ran away from being Jewish because they didn't want this to visit their children and grandchildren. This is a fact, that's true. But generally speaking, Jews do not live behind walls. We are an open people. The Torah says we should be an open people. The Torah says you're not allowed to steal from anybody, Jewish or not Jewish. The Torah says that you have a responsibility to try to influence everybody in a positive way, Jewish and non-Jewish. It's halacha and Torah. You meet a human being, you try to bring out the godly spark from within him. What do we, the Jewish people, feel about other human beings? That they are created in God's image. That's what we feel. That they all are God's potential partners. Every human being. That's how we feel. That's how we're taught. That's how we were guided. That's what the Torah says we should do. And on the other hand, we know it's a halacha. Esav Seina Liyankiv. We know it's a fact. Anti-Semitism is a fact. How do you square these two things? How do you square this? Either you believe people change, or if you don't believe people change, and I don't. So then, what's going on here? We believe in the goodness of humanity. We believe that deep down every single human being is capable of amazing goodness and that we have a job to touch him and to inspire him, to uplift him. That's our job. We do not shun the world. We never have. We have always continuously tried to make a contribution, to be a positive force. So how do you work out this seeming contradiction? On one hand, the Gemara tells us that the Jewish people are likened to a solitary wolf, a lamb surrounded by 70 hungry wolves. And this is it's a fact. On the other hand, we find that even though we know this to be true, and even though we know there's a lot of people who don't like us, we have always continuously tried to engage. So the Rebbe said, both are true. The truth is that anti-Semitism is a tragic reality and a fact, but it cannot define us. What has to define us is that we are supposed to be a light unto the nations. That defines us. Our job is to reach out to other people and to inspire them and uplift them. And to know that the reason that the Lamb is still around is not because we curried favor with this leader or that world leader, but rather because HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadim. Because in the end, our security, our future, our survival, and our triumph is vested in God's hands, not in people's hands. Because we are not a natural people. And because we're not a natural people, and because we rely on Hashem, on one hand, we cannot rely on miracles. We have to engage with the world. And great tzaddikim engaged with various world leaders, people of influence, minor figures, major figures. Whoever it would, if you had to buy favor, then we bought favor. If we were able to be a positive contribution, we had to be a positive contribution, always believing in the goodness of humanity, always believing we had something to offer, but at the same time to know that anti-Semitism will never fade or go away, and that our job is to do what Hashem tells us to do, and to know with perfect faith that in the end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadim. And the Rebbe says this. The Rebbe says that there are two kinds of anti-Semites. There's an anti-Semite who can't stand the presence of a Jew. And he says, the Gemara wants you to know, and this is what Esther was so intent, kisvuni l'doros, she said, because there's going to be another Achashverosh, there'll be people who think, it was an anomaly. Esther said, it's not an anomaly. This is going to be a recurring theme till Mashiach comes. There are always going to be people who can't stand the Jew. It's a pile in his field. What's it a pile of? Diamonds? Manure? How will they look at us? Soil? Rocks? Cotton? How will they look at us? I don't know how to look at us. Each one will look at us differently. But in the end, they won't be able to stand the Jew. Some people think that if only we'll assimilate, then all of a sudden the anti-Semitism will go away. This was what the Haskalah, the Enlightenment, pioneered in a country called Germany. How'd that go for us? Not very well. Not very well. The Jewish people would no longer have long beards and payas. No longer would they wear kippas and study Talmud. They would be Yehudi b'veisecha v'adam b'tzeisecha. You would be a Jew at home. Shh, don't tell anybody. Quietly under your covers. And outside you'd be a human being. And then when we stop being so Jewish, then the world will accept us. Said many people. And it never happened. The very country where more Jews were intermarried and more Jews were assimilated than anywhere else in Western or Eastern Europe is the very source of the greatest tragedy of all times. The anti-Semite who doesn't like a Jew, you're taking up space. It's not because you look Jewish, it's not because you don't look Jewish, you're still taking up space. As long as there's a Jew taking up space, the anti-Semite's got a problem with that. Why would Achashverosh want for the Jews? He's trying to assimilate them. He was being very successful at that. And now he wants Haman to kill him? He still couldn't stand him. Because really what he wanted is his empire to be Judean reign. Haman had a faster plan. Fast track it. No problem. In other words, the notion of the pile, the metaphor of what's trying to be communicated to us is people make the mistake time and again of thinking that it's our Jewishness that people don't like. It's not true. It's our existence that the anti-Semite can't stand. Nothing you do will change the anti-Semite. It is not because you're selfish. It's not because you're different. It's not because you focus on one thing or the other. It has nothing to do with any of that. You're taking up space. He feels he owns the world. And if he owns the world, you're taking up space in my world. That's the mashal. That's not a simple thing. Achashverosh is not an ordinary anti-Semite. Because most often people think anti-Semitism is generated by visible Jews. That has been the theory all along. That was Herzl's theory. The Jews will be a nation like everybody else, will be secular, will be like everybody else, and then anti-Semitism will go away forever. And it never happened. I just said that. Exactly. So that's the first part of the mashal. There's another part of the mashal here. The Gemara says that from the time Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people, there was a certain jealousy that came down to the world. A certain jealousy. The Gemara, it's a medrash, the medrash is Lama Nikra Shma Sinai. Why was the mountain called Sinai? And the medrash says, Al Shem Shemisham Yarda Sina La'ilam, because that's where hatred came to the world from. There's something, a certain emptiness. The anti-Semite feels an emptiness, and he feels you have fulfillment, and the way the nature of jealous people is, if you don't have it, I don't have, everything's fine. But you should have it, I shouldn't have, that's not acceptable. He had a gaping hole in himself. Haman hated himself. Haman felt an emptiness in his life. The conscience bothered him. Hitler Yamach Shmo wrote those words. The Jew has given the world a conscience. He couldn't stand that emptiness. And in order for him to get rid of the emptiness, he needed to get rid of the Jews. Because when there'll be no more Jews, there'll be no more conscience. That's how he felt. That's the anti-Semite who feels that something is missing. There's something that the Jew has that he doesn't have and he doesn't know what it is, but it must be some diabolical plan. It's a protocol of the elders. He looks like me. He says he wants to marry my daughter. He says he's not different. He says he bleeds like I bleed. I know he has something. There's something he has. And I can't stand that he has it. Plain jealousy. It's an emptiness. An emptiness, a vacuum that's only filled when the person you think has it is no longer. That's your two anti-Semites. Both Mishalim are precise and exact. And the two anti-Semites met. Achashverosh basically dropped his guard. He said, I can't stand the Jews altogether. I don't care if they're religious or not. They take up space. I don't want to have Jews in the world. Haman said, I feel this emptiness, this conscience. It's the Jews have done this to me. Once I get rid of the Jews, I'll have no conscience. I won't be bothered by these things anymore. I won't have that gnawing emptiness. Achashverosh said, you know what? No problem, take the pile. You get rid of them, it'll take care of your emptiness too. We'll both be happy. Hakesef nasanlach, he says. It's as if I'm giving you the money. I'd even give you money if I had to. In this way, what the mashal is really telling us about anti-Semitism is that all the millions and billions of dollars being spent on fighting anti-Semitism are a huge, colossal waste of funding and a huge, colossal waste of time. Because in the end of the day, none of it is going to change anything. The Achashverosh is going to remain an Achashverosh, and he won't be able to stand the Jew, whether he's assimilated, looks like him or not. The Haman of the world who's jealous of the Jewish people, who feels that the Jewish people have something that he doesn't have, his something is gnawing at him and eating up his kishkas, he's got a hole inside him, it's not going to change. You're not going to be able to change him. So what should we do? We should do what Jews have done all the time. What the Mordechai has to do. First of all, you have to have Hashem's protection. If we have Imleish Yishmer Shav Shakat Shomer, David HaMelech says. If God's not watching the city, they're wasting your time. On the other hand, there are good people everywhere. We have to reach out to good people. And we have to share with them a meaning. We have to share inspiration. We have to share spirituality with them. because then the emptiness will be filled. Instead of having to hate you, they'll say, oh, Torah has something to give me too. The more we share a message of positivity, the more we share a message of spirituality, the more we share a message of God consciousness and of Torah, the more we can eliminate anti-Semitism. And I can tell you firsthand it works. I speak to all kinds of people. They love hearing it. They're thirsting for a word of Torah. They're thirsting for inspiration. And that's the mashal. The real problem of the Megillah is, what is going on here? What's going on with Achashverosh? And the mashal is, there are two kinds of anti-Semites. Both have issues. You will not solve this problem. What does Mordechai and Esther do? They gather the children. They petition heaven. They get Hashem's favor. And then they put a plan into motion. That doesn't mean we should sit by with folded hands. Everybody says, what should we do with anti-Semitism? You're asking me? You should train every Jew to fight back. That's what you should do. Fight the anti-Semites. And what should we do? Strengthen our Yiddishkeit. We should earn Hashem's bracha. And if we will be strong and resolute, and we will become stronger as a people, and we will fight back, and the next anti-Semite gets his head split open, and the one after that gets the same favor returned before he gets to do anything, then they'll stop, they'll think twice. We live, Baruch Hashem, by and large, in a free world that formally at least, or officially, does not want to countenance anti-Semitism. This is a good thing. And as long as we strengthen ourselves as a nation, and as long as we continue to move Michael El Choyel, hopefully very soon Mashiach comes and puts an end to this mashal forever, and Heda will be Ameinu, Amen.
But I fight my way.